What if death isn't what happens to you, but what happens for you? What if that final breath isn't a closing, but an opening? Ibn Arabi spent years in deep meditation, experiencing states beyond the body, and what he discovered about the moment of death changes everything we've been taught to fear. Death terrifies us because we see it as annihilation, the end of consciousness, the end of self, the end of everything we know. But Ibn Arabi, through his mystical unveilings and profound study of Quranic teachings, described death as the soul's greatest liberation. He wrote, "Death is not a departure into darkness. It is an arrival into light. The body dies, but you, the real you, finally wakes up." So what actually happens in that moment? Let's walk through Ibn Arabi's teaching, stage by stage. Ibn Arabi taught that in the final moments before death, something shifts. The dying person begins to see beyond the physical world. The veil between the seen and unseen starts to thin. He wrote, "In those last breaths, the soul begins to remember what it forgot at birth. It recognizes that this world was never home. It was only a temporary dwelling." People who've been with the dying often report this. Suddenly, the person seems to be looking at something no one else can see. They speak to people who aren't there. They become calm, even peaceful, as if they're seeing something beautiful. Modern medicine calls these hallucinations. But Ibn Arabi would say, what if they're not hallucinations? What if the dying are actually seeing more clearly than we are? The Quran says, "You were heedless of this. Now we have removed your veil, so your sight today is sharp." 50:22. Ibn Arabi interpreted this to mean that death doesn't blind us. It clarifies our vision. Then comes the moment itself, the final breath, the last heartbeat. And according to Ibn Arabi, this is when the soul separates from the body. But this separation isn't violent or painful for the soul. He described it as like a bird being released from a cage. After a lifetime of being compressed into physical form, the soul suddenly expands into its true nature. He wrote, "The body was a prison the soul didn't know it was in. Only in death does the soul realize how confined it had been." The Quran describes this moment. When death comes to one of them, he says, "My Lord, send me back so that I may do good in that which I left behind." 23:99-100. But Ibn Arabi noted, by then, it's too late. The soul sees clearly what it spent a lifetime missing. Ibn Arabi taught that immediately after separation, the soul witnesses its entire life, not as a linear story, but all at once. Every moment, every choice, every word, every intention, all visible simultaneously. But this isn't judgment from outside. This is recognition from within. The soul sees itself with complete clarity. No excuses, no justifications, no hiding. He wrote, "In that moment, you become both the witness and the witnessed. You see yourself as Allah has always seen you." Modern near-death experience research has documented this phenomenon. People who've been clinically dead and revived often report experiencing their entire life in an instant, what researchers call a life review. But Ibn Arabi went deeper. He said this review isn't just memory, it's understanding. You don't just see what you did. You feel what others felt because of what you did. You experience the consequences of every action, the ripples of every choice. This is what the Quran means when it says, "And the record of deeds will be placed, and you will see the criminals fearful of what is in it." 1849. It's not a book someone else wrote. It's the truth of your own existence, finally visible. After this recognition comes what Ibn Arabi called the most crucial moment, the meeting with the two angels, Munkar and Nakir, who question the soul. But he explained these aren't external beings interrogating you. They represent the soul's confrontation with ultimate truth. They ask the most fundamental questions. Who is your Lord? What is your religion? Who is your prophet? Ibn Arabi said these questions aren't about memorized answers. They're about recognition. Did you know truth when you lived? Did you surrender to reality? Did you follow what guided you toward awakening? He wrote, "These questions strip away everything you pretended to be and reveal what you actually were. The soul cannot lie in this state. It can only acknowledge what it truly lived." For some souls, this is relief. They recognize the truth they lived by. For others, it's devastating. They see how far they strayed from what they knew deep down was real. After this initial confrontation, the soul enters what Ibn Arabi called the Barzakh, the intermediate realm between death and resurrection. This isn't heaven or hell yet. It's a state of waiting. But it's not empty waiting. The soul experiences a preview of what's coming, a taste of its final destination. Ibn Arabi described the Barzakh as a realm where time operates differently. What might be centuries in earthly time feels like moments or eternities, depending on the soul's state. He wrote, "In the Barzakh, the soul lives in the reality it created for itself. If it lived in gratitude, it rests in peace. If it lived in denial, it dwells in constriction." The Quran refers to this. Behind them is a barrier until the day they are resurrected. 23:100. Ibn Arabi explained this barrier isn't a wall. It's a state of being between one existence and the next. But here's what Ibn Arabi emphasized most. In death, the soul finally understands what life was really about. It realizes that every difficulty was a teaching. Every loss was a liberation. Every pain was a purification. What felt like punishment was actually preparation. He wrote, "The soul sees that nothing was random. Every moment was perfectly designed for its awakening. And it weeps, not from regret alone, but from the recognition of divine mercy even in what seemed like suffering." This is why Ibn Arabi said that death isn't the end of learning. It's the beginning of understanding. Ibn Arabi taught something profound about what the soul experiences after death. He said that in life, we experience Allah's names indirectly, through creation, through experiences, through other people. But in death, the soul experiences the divine names directly, according to Ibn Arabi's mystical teachings. If you lived with gratitude, you meet Ar-Rahman, the most merciful, face to face. If you lived with arrogance, you meet Al-Qahar, the subduer. If you lived with love, you meet Al-Wadud, the loving. He wrote, "Every soul meets the divine attribute it resonated with most in life, according to Ibn Arabi's mystical teachings. And that meeting is either the greatest bliss or the deepest agony, depending on whether you aligned with that attribute or resisted it. This is the true meaning of accountability. You're not judged by an external judge. You meet the reality you chose to live." Ibn Arabi didn't teach about death to prepare people for dying. He taught about death to transform how they live. He said, "Die before you die." This famous Sufi teaching means, experience now what death will reveal. See your life with clarity now. Recognize truth now. Surrender now. Because everything death reveals, your true nature, your real priorities, the consequences of your choices, all of this is visible right now if you're willing to look. Death doesn't show you something new. It removes the veils that kept you from seeing what was always there. Ibn Arabi taught his students a practice. Every night before sleep, review your day as if you're in that moment after death, witnessing your life. Ask yourself, what did I truly live for today? What drove my choices? Where did I act from love and where from fear? Where was I present and where was I absent? Don't judge, just witness. See yourself as Allah sees you, with complete clarity and complete mercy. He promised that if you practice this daily death, the actual moment of death will hold no terror. Because you'll have already seen the truth. You'll have already begun to wake up. Here's what Ibn Arabi understood that most people miss. Death is both an ending and a beginning. The body ends, but consciousness continues. The ego dissolves, but the soul remains. The temporary falls away, but the eternal emerges. He wrote, "Do not fear death. Fear the life you haven't fully lived. Fear the truth you haven't fully faced. Fear the love you haven't fully given. Death will come regardless. But how you meet it depends entirely on how you lived." Ibn Arabi's final teaching on death was this: the moment of death is actually happening right now. Every breath you take is followed by a small death, metaphorically. Every night you sleep is a rehearsal. Every time you let go of something, you practice dying. And every time you wake up, you practice resurrection. The question isn't what happens when you die. The question is, are you willing to wake up before then? Are you willing to see what death will reveal while you still have time to live differently? Because according to Ibn Arabi, the greatest tragedy isn't death itself. It's reaching that moment and realizing you never truly lived. The soul that awakens before death meets that final moment with joy. Not because it's escaping life, but because it finally gets to see, without any veils, the reality it spent a lifetime seeking. That moment you feared your entire life? Ibn Arabi says it might be the most beautiful moment you'll ever experience, if you're ready for it. Subscribe for more mystical wisdom and spiritual journeys. Let's explore the unseen together.